Hello! In this video, we're going to discuss how you make unit tests for Spring MVC and Spring Boot. On the screen here, you see our similar code to last time. This time, we're going to write two tests, one which will cover the GET call and one which will cover the POST call. In the video following this, we will go over how to write JCoco tests. JCoco test coverage, which is a UI-based coverage that shows which lines are covered, which lines are not, branch coverage, statement coverage, etc. And makes it very easy to visualize what work you still have to do, and then gives you confidence in what is covered. So we're going to start by going to our test folder and opening it up. And we'll see Java, just like our main, as well as COM-UDEMI Demo Spring Boot, just like our main. And then there's Spring Boot application tests. You may or may not stick with this one, that's fine, but it already has the scaffolding put together for you. So this is JUnit. You may or may not be familiar with it, but we'll go over what's needed to know. We're going to add an annotation, fix method order, method sorters, dot name ascending. What this says is to take the tests and run them alphabetically or numerically, top to bottom. Typically, it's a good idea to have your tests run in a way which is not going to depend upon any state. Unfortunately, that's not always the case that you can do that, so I'm showing you this just in case you run into one of those cases. So we're going to get rid of this context loads. And instead, we're going to write a first test using the annotation test, which tells Java this is a unit test. And then we're going to go public void test get. There's that. And then we're going to need to take the controller and mock it. To mock a controller is going to require that we do a little bit of setup. That setup involves using the mock MVC framework. So if we come to the top here and we write a protected mock MVC, it will do the import for us. And we're going to call this main controller mock MVC. And the main controller mock MVC will need to be initialized. So we're going to add another annotation at before. This will run before each test. Public void init, and there's a similar at after call, public void teardown. The names are not required to be init and teardown, they're just conventions. We're not going to use the teardown in this method, but we're going to set up the code. So we're going to say that this dot main controller mock MVC equals mock MVC builders dot standalone setup, and then we're going to go main controller dot build. As you can see, we don't have an instance of the main controller yet, so we need to create that. We'll start out by saying protected main controller, but that doesn't initialize it for us. So we're going to use what's known as auto wiring. If we put in the annotation auto wired, this will automatically initialize our controller for us, and we can see it's now been used, but we need to name it the same as we have below, main controller. And now it's initialized and ready to use. And then setting this injection here, we don't know where it came from, we don't care. We just inject the main controller into the standalone setup, and it sets up our mock MVC. From here, if we go back to the main controller, we can see there's two methods, /index and /testPost. First, we're going to write the test for the /index. That's going to be test get. Now, if we come into here and we write our test up, then we can use this MVC framework in such a way that it would make sense what's going on to a non-programmer. So we go main controller.mockMVC perform, then we can type in get, because it is a get call we're doing, and then we'll go index, and then dot param, and this is going to be key, and then we'll give it a key. Hello dot param value world, and then we can and expect that the status is okay. Then we close it out, add another dot right here to chain the methods, and we're missing a couple of libraries, it would seem. So if we go into the libraries here to find out what they are, these are going to be part of the mock MVC. So we need to try to figure out what's missing here. If we look at our pom.xml file, then we can see that the Spring test is included inside of here. If we do a Control F, then we can see that we have a test starter already that we need. So if we go back to our Spring Boot tests and we hit Alt-Enter, then we can import the static method because we have the test framework. If we import the static method, it asks us which one we'd like to import. I'm just going to leave that for now and go down to the status because there's too many options there. And now we see mock MVC result matchers.status. That's probably what we're looking for. So we go to this and we come back to get now. It should intelligently, but it doesn't, go to the mock MVC matchers. So one option we have is we can go down this whole list and find it, or we can assume that it's probably in the same container and look for the matchers that we added in here at the top, matchers.status, and change this to .star. And that did not work. So I need to look and see what the missing method here is. It's probably a request builder, I'm guessing. So status goes here, and in the documentation for the Spring Framework, you can find these tests. So we're just going to construct this from the ground up. org-framework.test.web.servlet.request, since it is a GET request. And then we see builders. So we're going to grab this mock request builder and hit type, and there's GET, there's post. That's what we needed. And now the GET no longer creates an error. The and expect, we're also going to need to import something to find that piece of the code. So we need to figure out what the library is for that. And that should also be somewhere inside of the Spring imports. So we go import static org Spring Framework .test.web.servlet .result actions .and expect .star. That didn't do it. So we're going to go and do an Alt-Enter and see if we can find this. And we can't. It's not in there. So I think what happened here is that we probably need an extra, yes, we needed an extra parenthesis here because we had not closed off our GET call yet. But we've introduced a new exception here. Unhandled exception, Java exception. This leads to the problem that we have to always throw an exception out of the test method because tests inherently can have an exception. So we come up here, we'll follow the Java convention of throws exception, and this will throw it upwards to the class itself instead of the method to handle. And the method, being of type Spring Boot test, will then throw the exception if there is one and then state what the assertion failed was. This allows us now to have a working test. If we are to look to the side, we see a play button for run test, and at the top of the class we see a double play button for run all tests. We're going to click run demo tests, and that will run now. and it's parsing and finishing. We see a little green bar down here, and then we see the process over here, which test is being run. And we can finally see output. So we'll wait for this to get done, and the test passed, and the status was okay. So there are more things we can do with that, such as looking at the result of the test to see what the response itself was, that it contains hello world. We're not going to do that though. Instead, we're simply going to write another test, which will be a post test. So we're going to copy and paste this code in, and we're going to do a test post. Test post will throw exception, and this will be very, very similar to what we did before. Only now we need to add a couple extra variables in. So now we're going to add in a mapper, which is part of the Jackson library. Jackson provides object mappers. So if we do a protected object mapper, then we can see faster XML Jackson data bind. That's what we want, and we're going to call it mapper. Similar to the main controller, we're going to auto wire this. That way it knows the initialization details for us. So now when we go back to our test, we're able to go ahead and do a mapping with it, which will look something along the lines of making a JSON object. If we go to our main controller, we see test post has a post object in the request body. So we need to mock that out. The way we'll do that is in the test post, we're going to create a post object. Post object test object equals new post object. Test obj is going to have the variables set key, hello, and the value post. Now that's all fine and good, but we need a way to pass this into the object. So we're going to start by sending a post call, post to index, and then we're going to say the content type is media type, dot application JSON, and that was the wrong media type that it selected. So media type, and we can look through here and see all the media types. We want the one that's Spring Framework. Dot application JSON, and then we're going to expect the status is okay. But that's not enough for what we need. We need to send some content. So we're going to do a dot content, and the content will be a variable called JSON. We're going to accept media type application JSON as well. So where did this JSON variable come from? Well, that's where our Jackson mapper comes in. This post object as it stands is not in JSON format, it's in Java object format. So if we state string JSON equals mapper, using the mapper we had above, and we write the value as string for test object, we can take any generic Java object and turn it into that JSON string. We're going to import the static method for post using the alt enter, and now index is not a post call. It's going to tell us it can't be applied to string. That's good. So instead, what we're going to do is to call a post call, which means looking at the main controller and getting test post. So now we're going to change this to test post. And it still is complaining a little bit, which I'm not exactly sure why. So let's take a look here. Post, mock request builder post is what we want. There we go. We had the wrong post imported again. We had the Spring Framework request entity post, when really what we wanted to have was the post for the mock MVC builder. we come down to content, it's not giving us any hints whatsoever as to what we need to do. So I'm going to rely on some of my knowledge from doing this before and simply say that there's probably an extra parenthesis here because there's one closing content type, but then there's an additional one closing off the perform section. If we remove that, the content is fine, the except is fine, but now we're only closing except and therefore expect is breaking. If we add another parenthesis and remove from here, we have now got a complete working function. But it's also complaining that something's missing here, which is a parenthesis. So if we then close things off, we've got a working post call. If we run these tests by running all tests, then we should see both tests pass. The only thing I could think of is that we've not stated what the function produces and consumes, which might result in a failure, but in this case it does not. Going over the results, we can then see what happened, and in the next video we'll go over how to use the library JCoco, which stands for Java Code Coverage, to explain how coverage reports work. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next video.